But my point is, I want to be an advocate for Nebraskans and Nebraska, for American citizens. And when they need somebody that's got some power as a U.S. Senator to say, hey, wait a second, stop this EPA or OSHA or FEMA, whatever, I want to be there. And I'm supported by Nebraskans. A big deal for me is over 80% of my financial support for the U.S. Senate is coming from Nebraskans.
I read that. Yeah.
I'm not taking the Washington D.C. special interest celebrity. Who are these people? Endorsements and money. I think I've had one PAC endorse me, and that's the Independent Community Bankers, which I'm a proud member of. But other than that, I'm not seeking nor wanting that money. So,
what do you think of Senator Johan's career in the Senate?
Well, I think he's been a good senator. When I met with him, he was very careful to not be discouraging, but I think he just had enough. But I see an opportunity to take the Senate, which I think a lot of us do as Republicans, and that'd be a brand new ballgame.
Well, because I know a lot of the things that you're saying about the size and scope of the federal government, especially from the regulatory point of view, Johan's has fought as hard as anybody on that, from farm dust to, well, just, you know.
But Greg, as a minority senator, I mean, it's tough stuff.
Right.
And you have your life dictated to by Harry Reid telling you when you're in session, when you're not, what you can look at, what you can't. I mean, the Republicans have brought numerous, let's say, alternatives to Obamacare, for example, through the House, but it can't even get introduced on the Senate floor. And the Democrats, with Harry's leadership, suspended a 200-year-old rule on people that are trying to be nominated for things, which even if we get control, I'm bringing back that rule, because that's part of the problem, not having anybody on the other side vote for something.
A couple of things that I think you've taken pretty strong positions are. One is immigration, and just bring us up to speed there. So.
Yeah, well, you know, until I had decided to run, and I still hadn't been to the border, so I went down to the border to Nogales, Arizona, and I'm kind of a little bit of a fence guy growing up in Palmer and in agriculture, and I'd say the ceiling in here is, what, 7 feet or something like that?
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, you go down to Nogales, Arizona, and there's a 18-foot fence that the federal government has constructed in Nogales. And the good news is it's virtually impenetrable. It's 4x4 metal posts that are filled with concrete, buried in the ground, with a bar on the bottom to keep them from prying them apart, and one on top. And that's the good news. The bad news is, after about 3 or 4 miles outside of Nogales, that fence stops. And then there's what I call an X fence, Greg. You know, like in the mountains where you can't put anything underground, it's an X fence like this.
Okay, sure.
But instead of wood posts, it's steel posts.
Okay.
And then tacked on the corners of these steel posts that are in the form of an X, it's about as tall as this table, is old rail from Union Pacific, because I looked at it, from Pennsylvania, tacked up there. So you have an X fence, the height of this table with rail. Well, all you do is just crawl underneath that, and then there's a kind of a poor cow fence keeping the Mexican cows in near Mexico. And that gap is 300 yards before the 18-foot fence starts again. I've got these guys running around with these fancy pickups and walkie-talkies and cameras and monitors. But my point is, finish the darn fence, you know, and it'll virtually seal the border. And then we can talk about the immigration challenges we have in the United States. But until you get that fence built, then whatever you do on immigration is going to influence more people probably to come here. I think Obamacare was about a party and a president that thinks the answer to everything is more Washington, D.C. I'm on the board of Methodist Health System, which is the holding company for 3 hospitals in the Omaha area: Methodist Hospital, Women's Hospital, Early Berquist. Before that, I was on Children's Hospital. Care was never denied to anybody that I'm aware of, ever. That was never the issue. The issue with health care has always been cost. And for our president to stand in the Rose Garden the other day with Sebelius, celebrating what she did and saying 7.5 million people. Just think about that, 7.5 million people. Of course, we don't know the details of that.
No, we don't know how many.
But I would make a bet, and I shouldn't bet as a U.S. Senate candidate, but I would bet that at least half those people already had their own health care. So then let's say 4 million of those 7.5 million are legitimate people. So we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, turned our health care system upside down, so 4 million people could have health care that they never wanted bad enough to get before, in a country of 310 million people. It is just darn near insanity.
Yes, it is.
But it's Washington, D.C. having to do something centrally and take over 17 or 18% of our economy, so 4 million people could have, it's just absurdity.
That's why I
Just
guess I
absurdity.
believe the alternative motive was tax increases.
But Republicans had not done anything either. Now, we've offered 3 different changes, but healthcare to me does not have to be that hard. You give people health savings accounts and choices of where they're gonna go, and LASIK surgery is what I use. I mean, the cost will come down, they'll go to where they're getting the best service and the best dollar value. Healthcare should be for catastrophic coverage, cancer, transplant. We don't take our cars in if we get a door nick or a little scratch somewhere. I mean, why should the government or health insurance companies be involved if I go to the doctor for a sinus infection this time of year? I mean, you got a health savings account. You add that pile of bureaucracy and reporting onto these poor doctors and nurses and hospitals, it's just craziness.